Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a cloud solutions architect specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion is one I've wanted to get to in a session like this for a while. It's Windows Autopatch managed via Intune, and this is something that has actually been out for a while. But whenever I first interacted with it, I knew it had some things that needed to grow to be better for enterprise adoption. And now that I'm recording this session, very glad to say that can wholeheartedly recommend Windows Autopatch at this time for enterprises of all sizes, and am excited for the potential of Windows Autopatch for environments that need to manage updates on Windows operating systems. The potential to simplify the process is huge, and to possibly regain working hours each month that would normally be dedicated to software updating. So we'll jump into the session, right? And we'll go along with the standard agenda. I want to talk about what Autopatch is, why we care, and then go through the requirements, components, some, planning, configuring, et cetera, as we get into the demos. So what is Autopatch? Well, put simply, Autopatch is a cloud service. It is a cloud service focused on helping you streamline the patching of your Windows operating systems, Windows 10, Windows 11. It is Microsoft managed. So we have a defined service level objective, right, for all eligible devices. Now, what does it mean, all eligible devices? You'll hear me say this a couple of times. There are devices that are labeled as healthy and those that are labeled as unhealthy that we will discover in your environment. So all of those labeled as healthy will be able to be factored into this and will be targeted for patching, where those that are not healthy can't be, right? So they will not be factored into the service level objective. So also, Windows Autopatch monitors in progress updates. This is part of it being a cloud service and being Microsoft managed. So depending on the criticality of the update, let me back up. So you'll see in a minute that there are some standard timelines and groupings and different things that will apply to make the Autopatch process work. Those are going to be adhered to for normal things, but depending on the criticality of the update and whatever, there may be a decision that the service makes to go ahead and expedite the process of deploying an update. If we detect issues, also, we're going to be monitoring for those during the release. Then we will go in to try to take remediation actions and so on, right? So it is a patch deployment service, but it's more than that. It's a little bit more care and feeding of the process along the way. And then I call out specifically Microsoft SLO. We often talk in terms of SLA, service level. Um, so why am I forgetting what A means? Service level agreement. Sorry, SLA. That's not what we're talking about with Autopatch. So Autopatch is a service level objective. It's a target for what we're trying to hit, right? It's different than an SLA. So why do we care about Autopatch? Well, big one, automation, right? Being able to automate the deployment of Windows, M365 updates, Edge updates, Teams updates, right? All of that factors into what is normally part of Patch Tuesday, and being able to take that process, automate it in an elegant way that still delivers your objectives is huge, right? Another reason why Autopatch, security and productivity. So automation of this process is going to improve security and productivity across the organization. Now, your organization may have a fantastic approach to updating already. Not saying that you don't, right? However, if we can automate ineffectively, or if we can automate in an effective way, the time that you're going to get returned to be able to work on other things is going to be a factor, as well as just the way that this is actually rolled out. So if you're using, for example, Configuration Manager today, there's manual steps that have to be done along the way. If you're using Windows Update for Business by itself, there is more automation already natively with Windows Update for Business than there is with software updating in Configuration Manager, but still not the coordination that you see with Autopatch. And then there's several other ways that you could also do software update deployment, and Autopatch rises to the top as best of breed to be able to accomplish those kind of things. I think you will agree, as you see what's built into Autopatch, that the structure really lends itself to effective update deployment. So unique features that are there with Autopatch. So closing the security gap. So Autopatch helps by keeping your software current, making sure there's fewer vulnerabilities exposed to your devices, closing the productivity gap as well. So Autopatch will help you adopt features as they're made available. End users can take advantage of those in a more expedited way to help them collaborate better, amplify their work, et cetera, et cetera. Optimizing IT admin resources. So this is what I've referred to a couple of times already. So if we're using Autopatch to automate routine endpoint updates, then IT pros have to spend less time on that. Right? Not to say that you won't spend any time. Of course you will. You're going to want to monitor your environment, make sure that patching is going the right way as you're growing confidence in Autopatch. But the amount of time that you're going to spend will certainly decrease. Being able to onboard new services. So Autopatch makes it really easy to enroll and minimize the time required for your IT admins to get started on different things. And then also being able to minimize end user disruption. So Autopatch release updates are done sequentially in deployment rings that you will guide, and then being able to roll those out in reliable, compatible ways using the signals that we get back to avoid user disruptions, etc. Good stuff. And I think, again, as we further dig into this, you'll see that structure and be able to appreciate the capabilities kind of baked in. Okay, so what are the prerequisites for Autopatch? Well, so you need network access, right? You're going to have to be able to use Intune and be able to reach the Windows 10, 11 devices. If you're effectively using Intune now to manage your Windows 10, 11 devices, then you surely have what you need. Still, there are unique requirements for Autopatch. For example, don't have it recorded here, but there are certain endpoints that your devices will need to be able to reach. So just validating that they can do that, and also making sure that your devices are all meeting the eligibility requirements. So that is one thing that each organization will have to ensure, is that the devices meet the eligibility requirements to be able to participate in Autopatch. Then certainly having a supported Windows 10, 11 OS version. All of the modern ones should be on that approved list. Azure AD, Intra ID. Either the device needs to be hybrid joined or Azure AD joined. This means no workplace joined devices, right? Intune managed, and that does include co-management if that's the situation you find yourself in. Being able to have access to the serial number, device model, and device manufacturer, which should be no problem to collect with Intune, and then having the device be at a current level of check-in. So the threshold is have the device having checked in within the last 28 days, right, to be factored into being able to be used in Autopilot. All right, so pretty simple. There's also some licensing requirements that you'll need to make sure you have, and the licensing requirements shouldn't be usually a huge deal. You'll need to make sure. So if you don't have the right licensing requirements, you won't even see Autopatch show up as I recall, mine's already onboarded. So in my case, I didn't have the right licensing requirements, so didn't even see Autopatch options really show up. But um, uh, the licensing stuff is there too. All right. So now, what are the components of Autopatch? So I'm going to show them to you here. Then I'll take you into the console and show them to you. But when you onboard, so here's a little note. When you onboard your tenant to Autopatch, we're going to create these items for you in your tenant, right? If for some reason you decide to offboard, then there is an offboarding process, but you may have some manual cleanup to do after the thing is offboarded. So, plus there is the ability, we'll talk about it later, to customize Autopatch. So with all of that in play, the best place to get experience with Autopatch first is in your lab, right? In a lab environment. If you don't have one, set one up for testing Autopatch, right? So that you then know what you're getting yourself into whenever you go to deploy this in your production tenant. So first component, we're going to add an enterprise application. That enterprise application is called Modern Workplace Management. Here's why it's used. Here's all the permissions that it has, right? So this is going to be used to interact with your Intune service, do configuration updates, etc., right? So that's there. We're also going to create a service principal called Modern Workspace Customer APIs. You'll see that show up in your tenant. We'll also create some Azure AD groups. Don't know why I have an apostrophe there. Interesting. Intra ID groups. These are all the group names that you're going to see and what they're used for, right, specifically. And you can dig into these. I'm just running through them real quick. I'm going to show them to you in the tenant in just a minute. We're going to create some configuration profiles too, specifically. One, call this out. We set the option that MDM wins over GPO. What does that mean? What that means is if you have historically speaking, group policy settings would always win. That's true with Configuration Manager. That's true by default with Intune. But now Intune is, whenever you're using Intune, you want to have that be the authoritative process for setting policies, right? And so we have this ability to flag that no longer does GPO win if there's a overriding Intune policy, then we'll let Intune be the winner on the device. Now, that does not mean for every single setting, right? Any setting that is defined by the policy configuration service provider, right? And that's a huge number of settings. That's where this applies. And if you don't know what I mean when I say policy configuration service provider, just go look up Intune and policy CSP, and you'll see a lot of detail about that, right? But that's there. So be careful, because if there are settings that you have in GPO that you need to persist, well, first of all, the best approach would be just to move them to Intune, right? Because that's where we want to be anyway to achieve the goal of modern management without reliance on on-prem AD. But if for some reason you need to persist those settings from GPO, just know that we inject this MDM wins over GPO whenever we configure Autopatch. So you'll need to make adjustments, or at least be aware of that when it goes in. Then there's a data collection configuration that we put out there so that we can collect data for use with Autopatch. Then we also have deployment rings. So the way this works is that we have a series of deployment rings that we define for you. Now, you may not like what we have, or may want to tweak a little bit what we have, or you may want to do some things custom, right? We do accommodate for that, but I'll show you out of the box what we have here. And this is not a bad structure for helping roll out your Windows updates, right? So you'll see a little bit in a minute of how kind of things are spread out between those rings, but these are the rings that we will create whenever we add Autopatch to your tenant. And then these are the update policies that we will put out there. There's a set for feature updates, and you see there's test, first, fast, and broad, and then also Windows 11, right? We also have the similar for Office updates, and then we have similar for Edge, couple of different channels that we support. They're stable in beta. And then finally, we have a PowerShell script that we add, which will talk about your client setup, right? So there's nothing hidden at all about this PowerShell script. You can go look at it if you want to see the changes that are being made to your PC. You'll see that as I show it to you in just a minute. And then here's basically this. I took this out of our documentation. This is basically a flow. I'm not going to go into it. This is for you to look at if you want to, but this is basically a flow of how things probably should progress, recommended to progress as you go through your Autopatch deployment journey, right? Staged approach to get out there, do your evaluation, piloting, finally get to your deployment stage, etc. So just a pathway. All of that precursor gets us to the fun part, to actually go into Intune and show this to you. Now, I'm going to have I'll show you where you go to set this up, but in my tenant, I've already got it set up. So you're not going to see me needing to onboard my tenant because my tenant's already onboarded, but I will show you where to go. So let me pull in my Intune tenant real quick. There it is. So the first thing, you want to onboard your tenant into Autopatch. Well, the first thing you need to do is validate readiness. So I'm going to go to Tenant Administration, and under Tenant Administration, there's going to be connectors and tokens. Is that right? Nope, Autopatch down here, sorry. So mine is already onboarded. So you would normally go to, in this section, you don't see it because mine's onboarded. You would go to tenant enrollment, right? Mine's tenant management because mine's there. And all Intune customers, right? So this is just to highlight again what I said earlier. You do need appropriate licensing. All Intune customers are going to be able to see Windows Autopatch tenant enrollment. But if you don't meet the prerequisites or have appropriate licensing, you're not going to be able to use it. So that's where the rub is. You'll see it, but you won't be able to actually do anything with it if you don't have the appropriate licensing or meet the prereq. So once you get into this section, one of the things you'll see is a readiness assessment tool. And this is basically to make sure that the tenant will meet the requirements that you need. And then you're going to have an option once you run that readiness tool, right? You can't do this until you run the readiness tool. You're going to have the option show up to enroll the tenant into Autopatch, right? And so you'll go through that, and then the tenant will become onboarded into Autopatch. It'll take a little bit for everything to settle, but the tenant will get enrolled, and then you will be able to see here, kind of what I have. Now, a little bit of configuration that you need to do here. So here's tenant management, by the way. So I would have any kind of configuration changes that need to be applied, right? There might be something updated that you need to approve at some point. In the initial release, whenever I first had this onboarded to Autopatch, the structure of how Autopatch service was implemented was a little bit different than it is now. And so I went into this section, tenant management, and I would see, hey, we need to make this change or that change or this other change to bring your tenant up to the level that is current. But I had to approve that first. So I don't see anything here, which means there's nothing pending for me to do. But this is something that a place you would want to check periodically and make sure that your level, you don't have anything pending here that you need to address, right? Another thing that you need to do is set up your admin contact. So this is an interactive service, right? So Microsoft manages it, but that doesn't mean that you are totally hands off. There may be some situations where we, Microsoft, need to contact you and we need to know who the right admin contacts are. Well, this is my lab, so I just have myself in there a couple of times. But this is where you would list out all of your admin contacts, provide their information, etc., etc., so that should the need arise, we know who to contact for a given situation. Here's just a history of your support requests. So you'll see one. For me, I requested that my original tenant be offboarded because I just wanted to onboard it fresh. So this basically is resolved, and this is just kind of the history of what happened. I can see the request here, etc., etc. So this is just a quick request to offboard, etc. Right? So that's one that I did. But if you have a new support request you need to have looked after, then the Autopatch team, and there is a unique support team, at least at the time of this recording, for Autopatch. So it's a special team that knows all about Autopatch and how to handle your request. Here's how you would submit a request for them. And then here's any messages that you would get about Autopatch. Now, this was having a little bit of a delay loading a minute ago. Let's see. Here's my service health dashboard, any kind of advisories or anything else that's out there. Not sure why I'm not loading anything, but I don't think there's going to be anything here. Anyway, right, so that's where you go and initially enroll your devices in Autopatch or your tenant in Autopatch. Now, once you've done that, then you're going to want to register devices in Autopatch. And this is where I want to kind of take a tour around and show you. So here's a section for Autopatch. Here's release management. Here's where I see devices. This is the section where you will want to pay attention to after you enroll. Might want to come back here and pay attention, after that as well, periodically. Establish a schedule for sure, a cadence, a monthly cadence, a couple of weeks, whatever fits for you, to come in and review your Autopatch service here. Make sure there's no pending messages. Make sure there's no pending actions. Make sure that you still agree and don't need to tweak anything with how things are configured, right? So before I get here and show devices, let me just kind of take a tour around of the different configurations that have been added. So I'm going to start with groups. Right? I'm not going to show the enterprise API or service principal because that's over in the Azure portal, and I just don't want to go over there right now, but it's over there. Here, I see my groups. And if I just simply search by Autopatch, we will see all of the default groups, right? So this is what's described by the documentation that I had in the PowerPoint earlier, right? So you see the different rings, test, last, whatever. These are all the groups that are created. I want to call your attention to this one, right? Because once you enable your tenant for Autopatch, that does not mean that your devices will start being managed through Autopatch. You have to intentionally include devices, right? And note also, put it in the back of your mind, what I'm showing you now is the default configuration of Autopatch. You can do some things to customize, and I'll get to that in a minute, right? But in order to have your devices onboarded and managed by Autopatch, they need to be in this group, device registration, right? And so you'll see that I have 4 devices in mine. So all 4 of my test devices are being managed by Autopatch, right? And then there's some others here. The other groups, largely with an asterisk toward customization, you don't need to worry about that much. There is a little bit, as you'll see. You can tweak some things, as you'll see in a minute. But largely, these care and feed themselves, right? But there are other things that are created. So if we go back to devices, then we're going to see that we have configuration profiles. I'll just stay at this level, right? We have under config. Well, under configuration profiles, we will have those two Autopatch configuration profiles that I put in the documentation, right? And there's for Office, there's the test deployment, there's all of these, right? Update policy, Office update policy that are through our configuration profiles. Here's for data collection, MDM wins over GPO, and then the rest are Edge, Office, update policies that we roll out, and so on, right? Now, we also have, you'll see, so update rings, right? Update rings. So you'll see some of these are basically reflecting the same thing. So that don't pay any attention to, but you'll see the update rings for update policy, Autopatch update policy. If we go back to configuration profile and look, you'll see the same name, right? Put Autopatch there. Autopatch update policy. It's basically the same thing being reflected in a different node of the portal. So there's update rings that breaks it out. Here's feature updates, which we have some, right? So this is for the moving from one level of feature to the next and such. There's quality updates, don't have any. And then there's driver updates. So we have all of this that has been created and rings for going out and putting that. Now, you can look, here's a little bit of interesting information potentially. If you're wanting to kick the tires on Windows Update for Business, you're not necessarily wanting to go onboard your tenant to Windows Autopatch, maybe, right? One thing you might could do is take your test tenant and onboard it into Autopatch, and then be able to go and look at these update rings, right? So one of the things we can do now, where is it? Sorry, let me go up here. I think we can do this, hopefully. Let's see. Scroll over, let's see. Yeah, so you can export a setting to JSON, right? Now. And so what you could do, if you just want to kick the tires, you could export to JSON and then import it into your production tenant just to see what the settings are, whatever. There's at least that option. But you can see, if you look at some of the policies, you can see how we are configured. So let's just look at one. So you can go see all the details about how we're configured. Here's the ring settings. We're allowing Windows drivers, which is where the driver update stuff comes in. And here's where we deploy it to, and so on, right? So it is pretty intuitive how it all fits together. So the test Autopatch update policy is deployed to the test Autopatch group. And then we go over to, I don't know, the ring 3 maybe. And then that ring 3, here's the same policies. Here's the update deferral period. It's also deployed to a matching group, right? So you start to see how it fits together a bit. We go down to driver updates, and we'll see all of these. The driver updates here are managed automatically. So we go ahead and say, look, go ahead and manage the update, the drivers automatically, which means that as new drivers that are approved by the hardware manufacturer are put out there in the catalog, we will start through Autopatch to deploy those things. Now, you may not want that, right? You may not want that. You may instead want to do things manually, right? And so that's where some of the customization comes in, and here's where we can see a list of recommended drivers, other drivers. If you have those pending. In my case, I don't have anything but VMs, and so the likelihood of me getting updated drivers is probably pretty remote. But if I do see them, then I can interact here. Now, if you're automatically approving drivers, then you're not going to have a lot of input over the list, right? And the way this kind of works is if you have a driver that's out there for something today and then an updated version of that thing comes out that's recommended, the previous version will come over here into other drivers. If you're manually approving, then you would have to go through and manually interact to get the latest driver out there. I love this only because, you know, uh, historically speaking, it's not been uncommon. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's certainly not been uncommon for new drivers to come out that cause chaos on systems. So at least in this way, you are able to build what you need to build and control things that you way you want to control them. Right. So um, anyway, right. So that's out there. Here, if you want to sync new drivers, you can to get things downloaded. Right. So anyway, all right. So let's keep looking. So we're under devices still, and so here we have our scripts. So under scripts, you'll see that we have a couple. Here's the Autopatch setup. Now, this one is something we'll show you. Now, interestingly, though, we don't actually show you the script. You see it's been successful. If we look at properties, you see that it's going to say that it's a PowerShell script. This is what it's called, right? But if you go edit it, we don't actually show it to you, right? In fact, if I go back here, you're going to see, again, no PowerShell script. So it is one that you can't really see, but you can see on the device where it ran. Interestingly, we don't actually preserve it on the device, but I'll show you where you can see that it did run. All right. All right, cool. So that is basically the process. Now, I've shown you the groups. I've shown you the components that are added. I've mentioned that there's a group that you need to have your devices. Let me go back to it just so you can, because we're headed there now. So there is this device group right here, device registration. That's where all of your devices need to be in order to get onboarded. Now, how do they get onboarded? Well, if you go to your device list and you go to your devices, right, then you'll be able to see all of your devices that are currently registered. Mine are all currently registered. I've just got 4 of them. You can also see devices that are not ready, those that are failing registration prerequisites, whatever the case may be, then those that are not registered if you have any. But on the registered tab, there's an option here to discover devices. So if you don't do anything, then the devices that you put in the registration group that I just showed you will be automatically discovered by the service when it runs its polling on its regular schedule. But it may take a while, right? Probably don't want to wait for it whenever you're first evaluating Autopatch. So you can go click on detect devices, and that's going to go detect the devices that are in the group now. Now it says it could take up to an hour. Generally, my experience doesn't take that long, but you can go detect them and get that process through a little bit faster, right? So once you do that, then the devices will show up. They will be try to be automatically allocated in different groups and so on. In a lab environment, it's kind of hard to do that, as you'll see in a minute. But that's really it for the default Windows Autopatch configuration. Now, you do have ability to customize. Let me start edging toward that. So if we go into release management, you'll see all sorts of options here, like release schedule. So let's see Windows quality updates. And what you can do there is show all of the update rings that are going to be applicable for the quality updates and whether they're active or not, and what the current goal completion date is. So here's our first deployment and goal completion and so on, right? So you can start to interact here a bit and see how things are set up. There's also one for feature updates. right? And here's kind of the default release schedule, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, for rolling out feature updates and so forth, right? That you can see active, and again, when the first deployment, final deployment, whatever. So all that you can look at. Know. Here's release announcements. So things that are coming up. Here's quality updates when they're coming up. Whatever, right? Okay, then there's the release settings. This starts to edge toward whether you want to allow expedited quality updates when we decide that we need to, whether you want to allow Microsoft 365 or allow Windows driver updates. If you don't want Windows driver updates, then turn this off. But if you want them, leave it on. Now, if you turn this on, you're going to enable automatic driver deployment, right? Now, if you want driver deployment, you want to actually use that, but you don't want Autopatch to do it automatically, turn it off, and then you can go in and create whatever policies you like. Maybe look at what Autopatch did and then turn on your own thing, whatever, right? But this is where you start to see ways you can customize. Then up back at the top, Autopatch groups. Now, this is where you can really get into customization. So this is our default Windows Autopatch group. So when you set it up, everything's going to fall under the default Windows Autopatch group. So if I click on that, you'll see, here's what all the deployment rings are. Here's the breakdown, right? So in our documentation, we say that ring 1 is going to be a tiny percentage of your environment, 1%. Then we're going to have ring 2, 9%. And then finally, the bulk is going to happen in ring 3, 90%, right? Here's where you allow or set deferral days. So here's ring, test, ring 1, 2, 3, last. Here's all the deferral settings, right? And then you can't do anything. You can edit them here if you want to, right? You can absolutely edit those settings to modify if you want to. This basically takes you into your Autopatch group customization, which I'll show you how to get to that again in a minute. But let me leave that for now, right? And actually go out of here too. So that's all under the Autopatch. Now, there is no requirement for you only to use ours, right? None at all. You could go create your own Autopatch group. So I'll just do this, and then you would have to set up your own deployment rings, and you would have to set up your own Windows Update settings, but it is totally possible and still be under the umbrella of Autopatch, right? Now, let me stay here for a minute. So here you see, yeah, do I want to do it here? Okay, yeah. So I'll just go back into this and just show you the editing, right? If you want to do something different, in my lab, I have 4 devices. So this spread doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but if you want to define something different for your group or for your world, you can do that, right? You can just go in here and define what your grace period is, what your deployment rings are. Why can't I do that? I can add deployment rings. So if I need more than the default number of deployment rings, I can absolutely add them. I'm not able to do that here. Why can't I do that? 1 minute. Okay, that's why. So this is my default. So if I want to go edit, I need to scroll over. Sorry. There's a little banner up here that was seemingly blocking me, I think. Anyway, now that I clicked out of it, I can scroll over and I can view the details. I can also edit, right? So let me just click on view details first, right? So this is going to be what I see. So here's my intra ID groups. Now notice my dynamic group distribution is going to be through the Autopatch device registration. That's where it all starts for me, right? So I'm not suggesting that you want to add another group for that, right? But at least you can see. If I want to edit the settings, then here's where I go do that and click on deployment rings. Now, why in the world can I not see that? I was able to a moment ago. That's very strange. Okay, very weird. Okay, apologies. Just figured out why. That's my fault. I actually have my zoom set up to 110%. If I go down to 100, then I actually see the settings. So I can edit the deployment ring. I can add groups to my deployment ring. So by default, as I was showing you, each deployment ring has an associated group. I can add additional groups if I want to, if there's some sort of customization that I want to do outside of the default, I can do that. Here's where I can go change the percent distribution. So if I wanted 5% instead of 1, I could implement that. You just need to make sure these all balance to 100%, right? And then this last one, ring 4, isn't being used in my case, so it's set to 0. Or it's not part of the distribution. Anyway, so this is where you go set the individual distributions, should you want to. So let me go back, and I'm going to go to deployment ring. So I can't, looks like, go through further because this actually is set to 0, and it needs a setting. Anyway, I can tweak these and then go to my Windows Update settings. It's not going to let me do that. One moment. Let me get back out of here. Let's go to Yeah, it's not going to let me because I have the deployment ring stuff I need to modify. But anyway, this is where you go through and you set up everything the way that you want it to be. Okay, so I went in quickly and reset everything. And so here I'm not making any changes. This is still not applicable, which it should be, so I can go past this. And then just the standard distribution. Here's, again, if I want to add groups to a ring, which I think is where it got me into a bind trying to set this up. But certainly something that you might want to do if you're wanting to customize. So that's here. Now, if I want to go forward and tweak my Windows Update settings and the deferral period and so on, right? Deadline and grace period and whatever. That's what I can all do here. So this absolutely is tailored for being able to customize what you want to do, right? What you want to do. Now, I'm going to tweak out of this back so I can go back to what I want. Let me go back to, there we go. Right. Now, so that's setting it all up. Right, we're good. Everything's set up to deploy. I've got it deployed. This is active on my devices. So let's go and see what it looks like when this is in action. So the first thing I want to do is log on to a demo machine. I'm just going to pull this one in. And, first thing, just to make sure the policy's there, I'm going to go into settings, and I'll be able to see that the policy is there because under Windows Update, it says, hey, you're up to date, but then there's some things that are grayed out because I'm managing this on the device. This is being managed through Windows Update for Business. I can still interact. Again, based on what policies you choose will determine whether you can do that. Let's go look at a Windows 10 device. Should appear very similarly. All right, so let's go look at Windows 10, and then we'll go to settings here. Updates and security, Windows Update. So yeah, so I've got some that just installed, but some settings are managed by my administrator. So it looks a little bit different because it's Windows 10 versus 11, but you can tell that I've actually got some updates deployed, waiting for a restart, and so on, right? So again, all of these settings you can configure with Windows Update for Business. Now, while I'm here, let me Well, let me show you this too, right? One thing that you might want to do is be able to actually validate the settings in the registry. So if we go to regedit, we can go into the MDM policy space, which is at this path, and you will see the update key, which will be for our Windows Update settings, but you'll also see this one, which is edge specific, right? So you can validate that there. And then just to show you, now you can't probably glean a ton from it, but just to show you where we actually show running scripts and so on. So all of these, so I showed you over here, let me just refresh what I'm showing you. So over in the portal, I was showing you under devices that we do have scripts, right? Right here. Now we don't actually show you the content of the script here, but we do show you that there is a script deployed right here. Okay, so if we want to see that script running, and oh, by the way, scripts, PowerShell scripts, are all run through the Intune management extension. That is not run through MDM itself. It's run through the Intune management extension. So we do have logs to look at that. So to find the Intune management extension logs, we simply go to program data, which is hidden by default, and then go to Microsoft and go to Intune management extension. Right, here's our logs, and then we can go and look at our agent executor log, and we'll see. It's interesting because if you want to know where PowerShell scripts are stored, it's pretty easy. So there's actually a folder called IME cache. That's one location for health scripts. That's going to be for proactive remediations, really. Right, but you can see that we're actually referencing a detection script and a remediation script. Again, that's proactive remediations. But then there's another location. Let me search up from the bottom. So let me go up. That's the detect script again. Keep going, keep going, keep going. It's going to be here in a second. There it is. So here's reference to another script. And I can't prove that this is the script that is establishing the Autopatch on the device, but by inference, I know what this device has gone through, and Autopatch is really the only thing that this device has applied to it. So it makes sense, right? And so this is stored in a different location, but you can see it being run in this log. So program files x86. So if I go to that, now I'm not going to be able to see anything, but just to go through it. Come on. Program, there we go, Intune management extension. Then I will see policies. And here's where scripts are. Now it's gone, so we've deleted it. I don't know how long it persists. I haven't gone that far, but you may catch it here at some point, right? But it's still beyond Autopatch. It's good to know where these locations are. And so you can tell that we have in fact run the script on the device. Now, so that's the device, and so the device has been patched. It is up to date. We can see the results of Autopatch in the portal. All right, so if we go back to the portal, under devices, we can go to monitor, and then we have our update reports here, software update reports, and we can go look at, I don't know, let's see, update deployment ring, see if we have anything there. Yeah, we've got a couple of devices succeeding. So 4 devices total. I have 4 devices enrolled. So all good. And if we see what we have, so we have ring 2 and 3 where the devices are located. So it all kind of starts to align and make sense. There's other things down here. If we do have any failures, now that's iOS and so on. If we have any failures, we'll be able to see that, here. But that is really trying to stitch together how the Windows Autopatch service is implemented, right? And again, I just want to start to end where I started. If we would have had this conversation when Autopatch was first introduced, the advice I would give is don't go with it right now. In fact, that's why I have not recorded this video until now, right? But now I don't see any reason at all to hesitate. In fact, I see every reason to proceed with adopting Autopatch. So in terms of, just to summarize a few things, customers ask, is it possible to customize Autopatch, or do we have to use it just like it is out of the box? Well, I've shown you. Customization is absolutely possible. Definitely, I would recommend that you start with the default configuration and then learn and see how it works. And then from there, if you do need to customize, you can do so in an appropriate way and more focused, right? I've also heard, hey, there's an update that's going out. I have some critical devices. That update's causing a problem on my critical devices. Can I intervene to pause the update? The answer is yes, right? It's you who's ultimately responsible for your own devices, and we are a service trying to work with you. But yeah, it's your environment. Pause it if you need to, right? Again, what devices are factored into the service level objective? Well, those that are ready or healthy are going to be factored in. Those that are not healthy are not intended to be. We know that they can't be updated, so they won't be factored into the service level objective. So that said, that's my tour of Autopatch. Wanted to share it. I think it's an awesome service. Definitely take a look and see if it can benefit you. Until then, see you next time.